Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of KDI Wealth Alchemist. We've got Shane Keith from our Payson office, and I'm sitting here in Scottsdale today. We wanted to talk about gifting to family, education goals, and a broad discussion about it, some best practices that we've seen throughout our years. Shane, do you want to go into how we typically see families save for college, retirement, and other goals all at the same time? When you're first starting a family, it can seem daunting that there's all these other pieces that you need to be thinking about and planning for. How do you approach that?
I would say we call it the greatest financial balancing act. You're trying to balance what is the top priority when it comes to, hey, should I be saving for retirement first? Should I be saving for education? Should I be saving in a 529 or should I be saving in a Roth IRA? There's so many considerations when it comes to where should I save? Where should it go first? And what is top priority? We preach that you can pretty much get a loan for almost anything in this world. One thing you can't get a loan for is your personal retirement. It's like if you're sitting on a plane and an emergency happens, and all of a sudden light comes on, the mask drop from the ceiling. What do they always tell you to do first? Put your mask on first before your child's, right? Make sure you get your mask on and then you can help others. And this is how we look at it when it comes to saving for retirement compared to saving for educational goal for the kids. We got to make sure that you're in the right place and in a good place first, and then we can start additional savings. That's where I would start.
And with that, we've also seen people less today going to traditional 4-year colleges, getting their bachelor's degree, even higher education. Where does that come into a consideration?
So let's say we're in a great financial position when it comes to retirement. Now we're starting to look at these ancillary saving options like a 529 or an education savings account or Agma. But when it comes to saying we're preparing for my child to what they're going to do after high school, most people are considering 529s right off the bat. That's probably the most popular at this point in time when it comes to educational savings. And they're probably the most flexible at this point. Other versions of 529s historically have not been as flexible, but with some of the most recent law changes, 529s now have a bit more flexibility. They can be used for almost any accredited school with some caveats and have some flexibility if they are not used on education, which has been parents' concern is like, hey, what if my child ends up not going to school? And Dylan, maybe this is something you can hop into. They now have the ability to do Roth conversions.
So, with some recent legislative changes, we've got more flexibility, just as Shane said. If there's some left over after the kids are done with school, or they choose one of these non-traditional routes, and it just doesn't cost quite as much as your typical state 4-year college, but you can convert today. It's a lifetime maximum of 35,000. The kid does have to have earned income, and you can only convert to the annual exclusion every year, right around 7, 8,000, depending on the year. You want to double check the limits, and the account has to be opened for at least 15 years. The guidance on whether the same beneficiary has to continue throughout those 15 years is still a gray area, but we've read and are interpreting those rules that the account needs to be open and have the same beneficiary for the last 15 years to be able to make those conversions. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and gives the children a head start, whether it's paying for education and then getting a jump start on their retirement savings. Likely in those first few years of working are going to be your lowest income years for most people. And it's the hardest time to save when you're just out of college and starting a family. You've got other expenses to think about and consider. So having that retirement account funded is huge.
I'll add one little nuance. We've been doing some 529 to Roth conversions. Depending on the state that you live in, you could see some state tax applied to that conversion. It's rare, but there's a few states, California being one of them, where they'll actually tax the amount from the 529 to the Roth conversion. Most states do not. But that's just a small little nuance of the rule. Dylan, you had some great there in regards to what and how flexible 529s are today. I would say the last few decades, we have a significant need in the trades. So a lot of push back towards trade schools and 529s have some flexibilities around. And that's not the only path for kids as they're starting to prepare for what they do after high school, may it be military, May it be employer-sponsored education? May it be some sort of certificate, which we're seeing a lot on the tech side, where certifications are meaning more than actually a college degree in certain career fields. Dylan, anything you'd add there?
Slightly different topic. One piece that we see is people sometimes don't understand the difference between whether the parent of the child owns the 529 versus whether the grandparents own the 529. Can you talk about why you potentially would want the grandparents to own the 529 rather than the parents?
It may seem like a very slight difference, but it makes a big impact in regards to the student as they prepare to go to college if they're applying for FAFSA. If they're looking for Pell Grants or federal loans, those 529 monies, if in the parent's name, apply to their total assets. So it could disqualify the student from being able to get a Pell Grant, or at least impact their ability to either get federal assistance from a loan or grant perspective. Dylan, anything you'd add there?
And then even if it's held in the grandparent's name, one piece that some people also mix up as well is you can contribute if you were the parent to that 529 or an uncle, aunt, extended family. Anyone can contribute and help saving.
The custodian or the owner of the account has the control of the funds themselves, not the beneficiaries. That's another reason why 529s became more popular than UTMAs, UGMAs, or other types of accounts. Some accounts out there for minors, as the minor becomes an adult at 18 or 21, depending on some of the rules around the account, they get to take control without even your consent. With the 529, the custodian remains in control and has full decision making long term and can change the beneficiary. Something that has probably come up and been more prevalent in conversations is regard to when family's in a really good spot financially, your child's preparing or you're preparing for your child's future, how much financial help is too much help? When does it become a detriment to the child?
It's more of a values conversation rather than a monetary figure. Everyone's different. We've got kids that spend almost nothing, and a few $100s would be a huge help. We've got kids that live lavishly and are doing very well on their own right and spend tremendously. So thousands and thousands of dollars may not make a huge difference there. So the things that we want to look at is how do we help children launch and get set up successfully? We see sometimes that's helping with first houses, down payments, flexibility with payments. That can be a huge help rather than just an annual gift. You can help with weddings, support grandchildren's education, and that really takes the lift off the parents to think about saving for their kids' college. It can be a small one, but it takes that mental load off. They don't have to think about it and can contribute when they're able to. The other thing we always coach grandparents, parents, when they're performing some gifting is we always want to create independence with the kids rather than a dependency. A lot of times we see if it's an annual structure or a quarterly structure where there's a gift coming in over and over again, whether the kids realize it or not, they do become dependent and count on that income. So it's not a rule, but it's something to be cautious about and consider. And we always like to have the conversation before these giftings start that this is not a guarantee. We're gifting because we're being generous and want to see you succeed and give you a head start, but don't ever count on it. And it sets everyone up for success.
And that leads into the piece of when those conversations are happening are usually when we're asking to get the entire family together in a family meeting, where it could be led by a third party like ourselves, but to ensure that if it's going to be specific assistance or type of gifting, that it's being done in a way that enhances the child's life, but also helps them grow and develop to the values you're trying to instill, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the ultimate point, is to make sure that either you're creating their independency and building a foundation for them to grow, and that the financial assets enhance and enrich their lives, not to in any way become a detriment to them.
We also want to discuss any estate planning that's been done. Typically, we don't include dollar amounts and discuss the values with the kids. It's all dependent on how you want the meeting to flow. But typically, we want to make sure that all of this work you've done ahead of time, whether it be trusts or various other estate planning tools, that the kids are at least aware of what to do if something were to happen. So that the tax benefits and that structure and the money you spent with the attorneys is utilized effectively. You get some benefit from it, but the kids also get a benefit And we don't want to blow up some of those benefits because the kids aren't coached and they don't know what is going to happen when that wealth transfer occurs.
I want to take a step back real quick just because we touched on 529, and it would probably behoove us to make sure that we briefly touch on a new type of account. The Trump accounts just launched. And so now you have an additional way to save in a child's account. And again, could be used for qualified educational expenses. So it does have that flexibility there as well. If your children, if you have grandchildren being born, any child born between 2025 and through 2028, the Treasury is providing $1,000 to start the account. There's some other individuals, for example, Michael Dell with Dell Computers and a few others that have donated and given money that could add to some additional free money that's put in that account, depending on area code and median income. With that being said, though, any child under the age of 18 can open one of these accounts. You can contribute up to $5,000 per year. They have a little bit more flexibility. They're not as geared towards education. I would say they're probably a little bit more considered a retirement account for these kids. There's some cool strategies that have already been thrown around of what they could look like if you saved roughly $5,000 a year for 18 years and then considered a Roth conversion at that time. There's no limits on what you can convert to Roth when the child turns 18. Of course, if you have any questions around these types of accounts or maybe how they could add to your current savings strategy, feel free to reach out to us and we can take a deep dive on those accounts. With that being said, I want to go back to where we started with how do we know and when we should start saving for college or these other savings goals? Of course, it all starts with planning. And back to the way to start any sort of financial relationship should be with a financial plan. Once we have a financial plan in place, all of these conversations become significantly easier because then it's just a small tactical change here or there. As a recap, we want to make sure that we're saving for our retirement first, right? So if you haven't started, first and foremost, we need to make sure that the plan starts with you, making sure your retirement is safely in order and being prepared for. And then we can start looking at some of these additional saving options for the kids for college or for their retirements. Anything you'd add to that, Dylan?
There's good blanket statements out there, but it does become a personalized conversation and your values play into just as much of that as anything else. So we always want to talk through, and like you said, it starts with a financial plan.
Yes, it does. I thought we'd do something a little different at the end and throw a couple of questions back and forth. So first question, Dylan, you give your child $10,000 today or you leave them $50,000 later?
I'd lead towards 10,000 today, whether they touch those funds or not. Let's say they're in their young 20s, that can make a huge difference. If they're even younger, that power of compounding and having 30, 40, 50, 60 years to compound and invest and grow, I think could make a much bigger difference with 10,000 today versus leaving 50,000 when you're gone. The other piece is you get to see and witness the impact of your generosity and your gift while you're still around.
That's something we've seen a rather large change in estate planning philosophy. I feel like with most of the baby boomer generation, along with the Gen X generation, where they're starting to enjoy letting their kids enjoy some of their inheritance, either together with family experiences, may it be a group travel trip or a big family reunion, but the inheritance is being spent on experiences today where they're getting to enjoy it with their grandchildren, great grandchildren, their children all together, rather than leaving a large estate at the end of life and never getting to see how it was used or spent.
All right, so I'll throw one your way. Would you rather help with a down payment or with a wedding?
I'd say both are important. I think this is just my personal philosophy. The wedding industry has gotten out of control. The amount of money being spent on weddings is outrageous, and that's personal. So I think a down payment on an asset like a house makes significantly more sense. But I can see the benefit to both. I think helping reasonably on either one. I think there's some real stock in having your child or grandchild have some skin in the game with both. Yeah, help them with the down payment, but what are they anteing up to make sure they're helping too? Do you pay the full value for your child's first vehicle, or do you have them save up some and also add to it? From some personal experiences and watching people in that scenario, Most of the times when the parent or grandparent bought the first vehicle for the child or grandchild, that car's not taken care of as well as if the child themselves had put some money towards it. That's just my personal philosophy.
I completely agree there. We've seen it time and time again.
So you're preparing for your child's college. Are you going to fully fund their college, or are you going to require some either resources or skin in the game from the child themselves?
My philosophy is I would rather be over prepared. So I'd likely have enough funds to fully cover it. I likely wouldn't tell them that's going to be the case and would really push for scholarships. But the more that they get, the bigger that retirement fund, now that there is some flexibility options within the 529s, it lets them get a head start as well. The harder you work, the better grades you get, sets you better off towards retirement as well, not just getting through college.
I would add that I think it also depends on the child. Every child's different, and I personally have two boys, and I think one of them I could fully fund, and they're young, so this is a judgment on just their personal behaviors today, but they're young. With one of them, I could fully fund, and I wouldn't have to worry that it was going to be misused. The other, I'd probably make sure they had some skin in the game. I worked while I went to college. I'm not saying that's necessary for everyone, but it made sure that while I was going to college, it was a serious experience. I didn't have a choice. I needed to take it serious. So having some skin in the game, I think in anything we do in life adds that little extra zest to make sure that it's successful. So,
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
yeah, you guys have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.